Hello, I'm Eagle, and this is the Organic Wormhole. Welcome to another episode. We have a special one tonight for you guys. Mr. Jeff Lowenfels. Hello,
Hello,
sir. How
I'm
you
Eagle.
doing? It's
Good,
a
good,
pleasure
good.
to have you with us this evening.
It's a pleasure to be alive. I can tell you that right now. Yeah, it's good. Everything's good.
Right on. Well, I think Mr. Smiley kind of addressed this out before the show, but how long have you been at this? I mean, you have been dumping information now into the community for quite some time.
Yeah, 40, I think I'm going on 48 or 9 years, somewhere in that area. Yeah. Whew. It's a long time. Long time. It just goes to, and what changes, it's just, fortunately, there have been some changes, so I don't have to repeat myself all the time. But holy crow, when I first started out, it was chemical, chemical, chemical. And the more chemical, the better. And there was only one kind of chemical basically to use. Otherwise, you were, sort of not adhering to the program. And then all of a sudden, Elaine Ingham and boom, things just cracked. And today, it's just such a different world. I have an outdoor greenhouse. I live in Anchorage, Alaska. And so I was out there cleaning up and I happened to see a couple of packets of stuff that were laying around, and I looked at the back of them and they're full of the ingredients are listed and they're bacterias and it's incredible. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, if you say bacteria to somebody who was a normal gardener, they'd go, what do I do? How do I get rid of it? And now it's just, we've swung the other way. And those poor guys, it's funny, the poor guys that make the liquids that we don't talk about, had to buy into the cannabis industry in order to try to revive their business. And I don't think that worked that well, but they're still in that process. But whew, what a bunch of changes. Yeah.
So there has been so many changes over the years. What's got your attention currently?
Well, there's no question that this new branch of the soil food web called rhizophagy has caught my eye. Just a quick review. So when teaming with microbes came out, basically what I was doing is I was explaining what Dr. Elaine Ingham was doing and what she had discovered, and which she now calls the poop loop. The plant attracts bacteria and fungi using exudates. The exudates are designed by the plant to attract the kind of bacteria and fungi that they need. And then they get eaten up by nematodes and protozoa who poop out the excess. And it turns out to be nutrients in plant usable form. So that's the poop loop. And that was the soil food web until people started to recognize the role of mycorrhizal fungi and until they became commercially available. So when that happened, an addition to the soil food web was the fact that mycorrhizal fungi were attracted by the plant by a chemical that came out of the roots, and that they associated, make a symbiotic relationship, and fed the plant all sorts of great nutrients. And because they're capable of breaking up phosphorus, phosphorus is one, or associating with bacteria that break up phosphorus. That was one of the big things that started to come into the plant. So that was the fungal loop. And now we've got a third loop called the bacterial loop. And this was first discovered in Australia. They were studying this in one of the universities of Australia, and they called it rhizophagy. What they saw were roots. That's my wife calling me. What they saw were roots that seemed to be engulfing bacteria and taking them in to their cellular structure. And they called this rhizophagy, root eating, I guess. And they lost their funding. And around 2000, I don't know, 17, a guy named Dr. White at Rutgers University picked up their studies and began to do further studies. and discovered that what was happening was that bacteria were signaled by the plant to back up against the meristem cell walls, the brand new root cell tip walls, and back into the plant, right into the plant. And as a result of a series of things, which we can get into if you're interested, these bacteria end up producing nitrogen, fixing nitrogen inside the root and feeding the plant nitrogen. Holy cramoly. 40 up to 40% of the nitrogen that a plant gets, it gets through this process called resophagy. And until 2017, we didn't even know it existed. So now we've got these three branches of the soil food web, and it's interesting to see how they play with each other, how they fit together. This new resophagy stuff, the products that are being developed in order to be able to make it work, and the research that's being done in order to be able to figure out how to, for example, identify and get the specific kind of bacteria you want inside your cannabis plant in order to feed it properly without being destroyed by the plant. It's just, there's all sorts of stuff that's going on. So that's resophagy is what's exciting me. Now, the Australians called it resophagy or something of that sort, but it took me a little while before I figured out that was just their pronunciation. I call it resophagy, and I think that's what Dr. White calls it as well. So it's really exciting stuff. It's worth looking up on the internet. It's worth looking up all of his talks. Dr. White, he is one phenomenal guy and has really, really done some phenomenal stuff. And I'll go one step further. It now looks like we know what's going on inside the trichome. Now, remember how we used to say, or at least when I first started doing weed, the trichome, what's the trichome for? We knew it had all sorts of good stuff in it, but we weren't sure what it was for. We said it's there to keep UV off the leaves or UV off the flowers, without really thinking about what that meant. That's what we all believed. It had some mysterious thing. And what Dr. White and his students have begun to discover is that bacteria, once again, are playing a big role. So just to back up for a second, when a root forms and you get a branch, you get cracks where that branch is forming. And bacteria sneak in those cracks, and just as they would a wound, and they move into the plant system through the phylum and the xylem and the phloem, and they move around inside the plant. Eventually, a lot of them end up in the flower where they get caught up in the seed so that they are in the seed when the seed is planted, germinates. These bacteria help the germination. They're the right kind of bacteria for that particular plant. They jump out of the seed, get into the soil, populate the soil, and bingo, your plant gets the right kind of bacteria that it really wants to have. Well, in the trichome, some of these bacteria end up in the trichome, which is a very simple structure. It's only 8 or 9 or 10 cells, and it's got this core, and the trichome are in there trying to fix nitrogen. Now, in order to fix nitrogen, you need to have an oxygen-free environment. And so the plant, through the trichome, sprays these bacteria and provide them this nitrogen-free atmosphere, or if that's the proper word, where they can produce nitrogen and feed the plant. Well, of course, they've got different terpenes and cannabinoids that are being produced that create this oxygen-free, and that's what gives the plant its terroir, its flavor, it's the bacteria, which is just mind-boggling. Okay, I've done enough chatting. That's kind of where I am right now.
So Jeff, you mentioned that they're developing some of these like bacteria that are function in that rhizophagy. And I was
Yeah,
trying to do some research into that, like what types of ones, and I'm drawing a blank on the names of them, but I remember looking on a bottle of it was Photosynthesis Plus, the one brand or whatever, and there was
yeah,
like three of them that were already in there, and I'm like, I
right.
bet that's why that you know product
Right.
has a benefit that people notice is
Exactly. There's a Bacillus subtilis. That's how you pronounce it. Bacillus amylocalifaciens. I can never pronounce any of these things. And Pseudomonas. And those are available. The Bacillus, the first one, Bacillus subtilis. There are specific brands of these or varieties of these depending on countries where they're developed. So Brazil has its own, and it works particularly well on their corn crops and wheat. Yeah. So what's happened is that the wheat growers of the world have glommed onto these and have started to use them. And so now people are beginning to do a lot of research in them, and they're appearing in the products. And it's the same thing with mycorrhizal fungi. I mean, all of a sudden we started to see various glomus in our mixtures. Now there are 8 or 9 different ones that are capable of being made in the lab, and they're sneaking into our gardening products. And it used to be I would tell my readers in my column, if you go into a nursery and it doesn't have mycorrhizal fungi, it's not up to date. You're not in a good nursery. Go find a better nursery. And I'm beginning to say the same thing about these bacteria products, which you can find in soil activators, and they're mixed in often with mycorrhizal fungi, and they really are terrific. There's some that are available to professionals. They require freeze drying, and then you got to deep freeze dry, that kind of stuff. They're these pink bacteria. They're very hard to ship. So the key thing, of course, is that you want to be able to make money. You're not going to study something you're not going to be able to make money off of and develop it. And so they got to be shippable. And that's been the big hangup. At some point in time, they'll come up with different ways of shipping these things, and we'll end up with some really skookum stuff. But it's the weed growers of the world that are really doing the work and saying, "Hey, this works. Use this Bacillus subtilis. This is great stuff." And where do you buy it? You can go to any head store. We don't say head stores anymore. What do we call them? Grow stores, and you can find it. It's terrific, really great stuff. Fun. And like I say, there's some great YouTubes. Dr. White, he's quite a showman. He's really good. He's really good, and has the capability of taking really complicated science and just bringing it down to your level and my level, and that's what it takes. That's what it takes.
If you continue to grow in the soil a certain strain, does the bacteria kind of succumb or be unique to that in particular strain year after year? Can it
Yeah,
help?
yeah. I mean, I think that's sort of what the take home for me is. So when you smoke Durban poison, first of all, Durban you I don't care where you are, when you have Durban poison, you know it's Durban poison because it tastes like Durban poison. Why is that? It's got to be because the bacteria that are transported by that seed far away from Durban, Africa, have the capability of providing, as we just explained, the terpenes and the cannabinoids and whatnot to be able to flavor that plant. And where do they come from? They come from the seed. So there are papers, and I wish I had these things in front of me. There's a guy, he studies corn, maize, and he's gone back 400 years. He's gotten species that are 400 years old. And you grow the same species today, they have the same bacteria mix basic in them. Well, why is that? Holy shit. It's because they're in that corn seed. They got in the flower, they got caught up, they're endophytic bacteria. They get caught up in the plant. Now, when you think about this stuff, you think about a plant. Well, just think about yourself. You think about yourself. Would you let a bacteria into a cut you have on your hand? No, you don't want that bacteria. And so you fight it off either using iodine or whatever people use, these Neosporin. You wash your hand with soap and water. You take penicillin, all that stuff. These 400-year-old maize plants have adapted over the eons to let these bacteria live inside them, inside the seed, where they're, obviously they got to eat a little bit of inside the seed during the time of seeds in there. They let them live inside the root system. They let them live inside the entire plant. They let them reside inside the flower instead of spraying them with all sorts of things which plants are capable of producing to kill the bacteria off. So what happens when these rhizophagy bacteria enter into the plant? Let me set the stage, and stop me if I'm just going on. What I like to do is I like to compare the rhizophagy system to a tofu container. Okay. Your meristem cell is that tofu container. And the hard plastic on the outside is the cell wall. Inside, right inside that cell wall, you get what's known as the periplasmic space. It's the liquid that's inside that tofu container. Are you with me so far? All tofu, doesn't matter what brand, it's all the same. It has the plastic, it's got this liquid all the way around it, and then it's got the cellular material, the tofu itself, which is contained inside a membrane that's in the center of the tofu container. So the bacteria move through that white plastic and they get into that liquid where they're cycling around that liquid because there's a cyclismic movement going on. And the plant goes, hey, I've just been invaded by bacteria, even though the plant invited them in. And so the plant sprays those bacteria with something called Ross. It's the same thing that happens to you when you go out and you get sunburn. You get sunburn because your cells have been sprayed with Ross.
Reactive oxygen species?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, good. Good. Yeah, so I can let you finish this. So anyway, so they get sprayed with this Ross, and the bacteria, they're circulating around without their cell wall, and they're multiplying, and they go, shit, I didn't like that at all. And so what do? They spray back the plant with the nitrite, which turns into nitrate, and ends up fixing the nitrogen. It's this complicated cycle. It's just a beautiful, beautiful system going on. But the plant, when it lets the bacteria in and sprays them, but doesn't kill them, lets them neutralize the Ross, the plant learns how to live with those bacteria. The plant, even though it's a little stressful because they're not sure what those bacteria might do, the plant lets those bacteria live, and it increases the plant's capabilities of handling stressful events. So your cannabis plant, when it undergoes rhizophagy, is not only feeding itself nitrogen and letting bacteria into the system, it's creating it's like going to the gym for the plant, and it's creating this stress strength capability. So it's a good thing that goes on. And the more we study these things, we're going to find the right kinds of bacteria. Some yeasts do the same thing. Man, this is beginning to look like something maybe we can start using. So then you start looking at your seeds and your seed collection. One of my favorite things at the end of the season is to have a male, and a female that got together, and I get all these hundreds of autoflower seeds, which I can collect. Now, normally, what I would have done is I would have cut the thing down. I would have hung it upside. You know how you treat your plants. You want to get the best out of your flowers. But if you think about the natural system, what happens naturally? Well, maybe those flowers fall down to the ground. Maybe I need to leave this. Maybe I need to leave these seeds around a little bit longer. You need to start thinking about what's going on and what you really, really want. So again, it's the weed grower that's going to be doing the research.
How do you feel? Because Dr. James White recently talked about protozoa and algae being take up in the rhizophagy cycle.
Sure. Why not?
So you think that there might be like other things that
Yeah.
the
Heck,
plant's consuming, not just, bacteria and fungi and protists?
yeah. Plants can't run around. I think they get whatever they can take. I mean, it's pretty interesting. Again, I think the staining seems to indicate, and we'd have to check with Dr. White, that it really is mostly bacteria and maybe the yeast too. But yeah, it's pretty amazing when you think about it. These things are, whew. But why not? I mean, these plants are sitting in there. My books are pretty sort of cut and dry in terms of the wonder. I might have a little bit of wonderment at the end, the last paragraphs, but Sheldon Meldrake or whatever his name is, and all these guys who write these books that get on the New York Times bestseller list, they get there because they talk about the wonderness of these plants that are these sentient sitting in the ground, unable to move a centimeter, that are capable of attracting whatever they need and bringing them in. The way they trick the bacteria into the plant, creating this, they create this fake slime, this fake slime. Bacteria live in slime, and they create this fake slime with no bacteria in it, and the old bacteria goes, shit, I'm going over there, man. There's a brand new house. I'm getting in there, and it turns out it tricks them to break through the cell wall. There isn't a house. It was just a smell. Wait a minute. God, where's the brain on this plant? How's this happen? I say, God, I mean, whoa, how does this happen? What starts this stuff? So, maybe I might have been a famous person if I'd done a little bit more wonderment and a little less, oh, here's the science, which is wonderment to me, but it's not to the New York Times bestseller list people. So,
So
I don't know.
how do you feel about plants being sentinel beings that can actually detect when people are around and be able to communicate either through frequency or chemical, through the quorum sensing, or through like chemicals in the air to let other plants know? Like, it's
Yeah.
so amazing, isn't it?
It's very freaky. There are a couple. I spent a lot of time in Portland, Oregon. My publisher is down there, and there are a couple of trees down there that I love. They're my favorite trees. I love to go over and touch the bark, knowing that instantaneously every part of that plant knows I'm there. I hope it knows I mean no harm. I'm not going to put a nail with a little tab on it or anything into it. Yeah, it actually, there are times when it's just a gorgeous day and I've been wandering around and I see a worm casting hole and, I see ants running around and, I say to myself, can I really pull that weed? I mean, who am I to kill that weed? Oh boy. Yeah, it is a wonderment, an absolute wonderment. And we should really, I don't know how they're teaching this stuff these days. I don't know how they teach Razafagi in elementary school and high school. And I'm always complaining that they teach dinosaur instead of soil food web. We learn dinosaurs that are dead and will never come back. And we ignore microbes, which are just as complicated and just as hard to spell, and can be just as nice as a plush toy as a dinosaur can be. I wonder how this is all translating down. And it's probably Dr. White's students that become the biology teachers and the et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, it's amazing, amazing stuff. And mushrooms, I mean, fungi. God, look what's happening. I'm sitting here I'm drinking an adaption drink. It's root beer. It's got mushrooms, all sorts of stuff. I love it. It's just
So
coffee stuff. Everything now is mushroom.
how do you feel about electroculture and some of the science behind it, pulling atmospheric energy out of the atmosphere, putting it in the ground, kind of
Yeah,
like grounding yourself barefoot outside?
yeah. I'm there's probably something to it. I don't know what the science is. my son, for a long time thought he was going to invent the coil, that he could put around your cannabis plant, make it grow 3 times bigger. And so I kept saying, convince me, show me this, show me the science. Now there does seem to be something about walking around barefoot and forest bathing, and there is no question they are now beginning to tell adults you need to put your hands in soil, not just kids. Adults need to have the bacterial biological fix, which we know soil contains this mycobacterium or whatever it is. So there's probably something to it, but I don't know. But by the same token, boy, and I'm going to, it's a good thing this isn't really politics. I got to scratch my head about Steiner. I mean, here was a guy, he wrote one paper. It was in German. Who knows who translated it properly? And he said, burn a couple of mice and throw them over 2 acres of land, and it's going to make everything grow fabulous. Well, I think that's bullshit, but good God. There are a lot of people who do it, and they use the compost that comes out of those horns, and it's pretty miraculous. So what do I know? I don't speak German.
I will say, play with biodynamic preparations a bit, and it is phenomenal what you can do with a very, very small amount of material. But it works in foliar feeds just as well as it does in biodynamic prep. So I don't know what the line is there.
Yeah, I don't either. And I'm not saying biodynamics doesn't work, and I'm not saying you don't get some incredible microbial populations out of this. In KNF is great, and all of this stuff is soil food web oriented. In the long run, it's microbial. Some of it's more anaerobic than aerobic, but ultimately it all ends up doing the same thing, and that is servicing the plant. The plant's in charge. And so the plant doesn't say, shit, that's KNF stuff. I don't want those bacteria.
Yeah, that's something that John Kempf always talks about when he talks about plants is how everything works at the behest of the plant. And so that brings me back to that in the context of all of this discussion.
Right. Which is why the first book I wrote was Teaming with Microbes. I wrote it because I was so in awe of the system. It was the first time since I took geometry that things just fit together. My God. It was just such perfect sense. And then one day I was sitting at a restaurant looking at a picture of a couple of women, and they were eating spaghetti, and I started to think, how do plants, it's the plants in charge, the plants in control, they're the ones that attract all these soil food web things. But how do they take it in? How do the plants eat? And so that began the wonder, Teaming with Nutrients was supposed to be a wonderment book. But it turns out, Jesus, this is a really scientific way this all works. And I couldn't believe it. It was so, again, it worked. All of this stuff just blows my mind, which is why I haven't written another book, because I started to do nematodes, but they scare the hell out of me.
So many.
There's so many, and they're freaky, and they're quasi snake-like. So it's, I don't know. But the wonderment never stops, and there's always a new discovery. I mean, last week I read this great article about kelp, which we all know works great. We always say it works because it's got 57 different micronutrients in it. And then I always say, well, have you looked at Teaming with Nutrients? I don't think it uses all of those 57. How does it? But what we now know is that the kelp helps the bacteria and the microbes talk to each other and do what they need to do. And wow, okay, use kelp. Gee, so there's always new stuff that people are discovering, and we're definitely getting to the point where, as Dr. White says, we're going to have a dandelion killer, a grass that contains bacteria that jump off and go kill dandelions and then jump back onto the plant again. It's coming, and the reason why we know it's coming is because people would make money off of something like that. That's the exact same reason why Bayer or Bayer or whoever those terrible people are, sorry, folks, why it's the exact reason why they're studying this stuff. And they're all going to turn out to be good guys, but it's going to be the profit motive that makes them run, won't be the academic stuff. So
Jeff,
So
how much would the teaming of nutrients book change with the rise of phage cycle, or is that all real similar? Because yeah, some of the ways they talk about the nutrients getting into the root.
Yeah, I never thought about a revised edition of Teaming with Nutrients. This is the very first time that concept has come to my mind.
that's what I was just getting ready to bring up. If you've done any revisions of your book since some
well,
new
I did do a
information.
yeah, I added I did a revision of the first one. Well, what happened was I did a revision of the first one. I added mycorrhizal fungi to team with microbes. And I think what happened was Timber Press said, well, why are we doing a revision? Why don't you just do new books? Just do a whole book over the thing. And it's as sad as a series. So I did teaming with bacteria, the reservoirs. And I guess I could have emphasized a little bit more in the, and I probably will if there will be more printings. Yeah, there should be a connection between them. There's no question that the same thing with mycorrhizal fungi. I mean, that's another way nutrients get in. Although the mycorrhizal fungi don't go into the cell; they go between the cells, as I recollect. Yeah, they go between the cells. Yeah, it's a good question. It's a real good question. And now I'm not going to sleep tonight thinking about what I should.
Sorry.
I think that was a great question. And also, I also think it makes sense that you roll out with new books, because then you're not trying to update old renditions. Then people have old copies, new copies. It's better to just roll something new and have new content.
Yeah. Plus mistakes happen. So every time Teaming with Microbes came out and had a mistake on page 46 and 7. I reversed the pH. I blame the editor. It's me. I was, it was so stupid. And every time they reprint it, they go back to that edition instead of using the last. So all of the corrections we've made, and there've been a couple of other small ones, a little typographical. I could kill them. But now the Timber Press was purchased by a Gigantundum Press. And they've been very good so far. So we'll see. And the books. I've been lucky. I mean, I complain about the fact that, hey, how come Team with Fungi is not, Sheldon Mendrake's book? His books are wonderful. Don't get me wrong. He's a wonderful writer. But on the other hand, I'll bet his books aren't translated into Turkish. These books people use, and that's what they were for. They were for people to use, never to make money. They don't make a lot of money, but boy, oh boy, a lot of people read them. I just came back from Spanibus, where I got to speak. It was something else. I mean, it was something else. There were people garden using the soil food web. It's living soil time. It's not Miracle Grow time. I did not see jugs of chemicals being sold at Spanibus. I saw living soils being sold at Spanibus.
They can't afford it in Spain. I have breeder friends in Spain, and they don't have the budget to go out and buy all that bottled crap and spend a fortune on it.
Yeah, why do you have to buy water? Well, and they need the water on top of everything else. Yeah, and it's interesting what's going on. There was a lot of interest from people all over Europe afterwards, and came up and said, "Gee, we ought to get you to come and speak." And hey, I'll go to Romania any day. Send me to Poland. Okay, but what happened with Germany, which was like a week later, all of a sudden, boom, and people in Germany apparently are going bonkers, growing. They're buying grow materials like crazy, which is good. I hear Luxembourg may be next. What else? What else did my friend tell me? Montenegro. A couple of other places are going, and of course, we may end up in the United States. Who knows?
So how do you feel about Matthew Powers and some of the research and information he's been putting out? Because I see that you've kind of been a part of some of his panelists or been talking with him on some stuff.
Yeah, I think he's an amazing citizen scientist. I mean, good God, that guy has access to microscopes and presses, and he's got the energy of a jackhammer. Holy cremolo! Is all of his stuff exactly accurate? I don't know. I'm assuming most of it is. I'm assuming all of it is. I'm sure there's mistakes here and there. We all make mistakes, but he really, really, really goes for it, doesn't he?
I'll bet it's accurate to date up to model to what we know.
Yeah. Yeah, he's really something. And his publications are beautiful. His YouTubes are fun. Everything. He's a fun guy. Yeah. Yeah, it's fun to see this happen because for a long time, there were 5 or 6 of us, and people laughed at us. It was, man. I remember taking a walk. There was a guy, I think his name was Judd Ringer. This must have been 30 years ago, well before Teaming with Microbes, and he made a series of organic, although organic wasn't really a term people used, organic stuff, and I had a bag of it, and I read the ingredients, and it was things like feather meal and soybean meal and oats and he was a member of the Garden Writers, and I remember taking a walk with him. It was just him and I, and Miracle Grow was the big sponsor of the Garden Writers, and everybody used Miracle Grow. And I wandered around, and I kept saying to myself, I wonder what this is. I mean, and he explained without the words microbes anywhere, because people didn't think in those terms, that this was good organic stuff, and it broke down and plants ate it, and it was good stuff. And that was the beginning, I think. Wasn't really J.I. Rodale. It's the commercial products that got people to start thinking, okay, why is this for sale? It's pretty amazing. And there have been incredible changes.
So how do you feel about Gabe Brown and what Gabe Brown and like Ray Archuleta has done in the regenerative agricultural industry?
Regenerative to me is soil food web. That's just all there is to it. It's soil food web by nice people. Does that make sense? You treat your employees nicely, you treat your animals nicely, you be nice. The system, it recognizes that we're just a part of the system. We aren't the runners of the system.
It sees the value of relationships, right?
Yeah, I mean, and we're part of that relationship. We're not the controller. We're not God.
Well, as Ray Archuleta states,
Yeah.
we're all one.
Right.
We're all one.
Yeah, well, that comes from Ken Kesey and what was his buddy? Ram Dam. Anyway, yeah, that comes from the 60s. We're all one. It was a cover of a book. It wasn't that was meant in terms of anti-war and peace on earth and all that kind of stuff, but this is all the same stuff. We've been at war with the microbes in our gardens for too long, since World War II. Before that, we were not at war with our microbes.
I'll bet we have all exchanged the same nitrogen over the past 50 years too. At some point, at least one molecule has been through every single one of us.
Hard to believe. Yeah, and all of that. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe. Yeah, it's kind of a funny evolution. I remember reading, and I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago. Maybe it was on the podcast that I do. We were talking about. It used to be that if you found an island that had guano on it, you could claim that island for the United States, and you would own it. The United States would protect it, but you would be the owner of that island. I think that law is still on the books. And so the Germans, who had this gigantic agricultural industry, relied on guano. And so they would go and their Navy and everything was designed for fertilizer. And somebody got up and said, "Oh, this does not look good." And so the Bessemer process came as a result of anticipation of running out of guano. And that started the war right there. And now I think we've sort of turned the corner, and we're beginning to learn how to work together. I'm thinking about my yard, for example, this summer. I mean, the snow is just melting right now. It's full of debris. All of that's going to get mulched up, left where it is. My wife keeps saying, "What do we do with all the spruce cones underneath the spruce tree?" I said, "Why do you think they fell there? They're feeding that tree." And so that's a way of thinking that I would not have had 30 years ago when I was walking with Judd Ringer. And it was sort of a philosophy I think that he had developed, that all of this stuff is plants. So why wouldn't a plant like it? We're all one. It makes sense. And yeah. And I never really equated the 60s, because that's where Ram Dass was, with with this whole concept. But yeah, it was regenerative everything is the whole earth catalog. Yeah, anybody ever heard of that? Yeah, I mean that was the whole deal. We're all part of this catalog. We're all part of the earth. Different way of looking at it today, same concept without question.
So what other, like, seeing you on several different YouTube channels, podcasts, what do you like the most about this cannabis industry that you've got to be a part of? The lectures, the book writing, growing,
consuming. I love to consume cannabis. Oh God, I'm a vapor. I don't not oil vapor. I'm a flower vapor. So the taste to me is, and it's gotten to the point now where there are actually some I don't like. Oh, geez.
So is it the flavonoids, terpenoids that you really are looking for when you're growing these plants now? Because you said you like vaping for the flower, so I'm assuming the terpenoids
yeah.
and flavonoids.
I don't breed. So I just, if I get a seed, I plant it. And if it's good, I love it. If it's not good, I find somebody that loves it and give it away. But I like lemon. I met the guy that did all the lemon breeding. His name is Chuck Charles. He lives in Denver area, and he did all the lemon breeding in Holland. So every time I love lemon. I love Durban poison. But I love the plant. The plant is a beautiful plant. It is easy to grow. There's a reason they call it weed. It has a spectacular shape. It has a spectacular texture. It has spectacular colors. And it's a wonderful landscape plant as well as everything else. I grow some of my autos along with my other flowers. It just fits right in. It's beautiful.
So just discuss your autos, because I've followed you for many years and I've heard you talk that you really enjoy growing auto flowers versus photo.
Right.
Why?
I'm glad to hear you're a fan.
Yeah, well, I live in Alaska, so that's the ultimate answer. So when we grow Matanuska Thunderfuck, Jesus, that had to have been an auto as far as I'm concerned. What happens, of course, is you don't really get flower until you get more night than day. That happens just about when we're having our first frost here. So unless you have a really good greenhouse, and then you got another 2 months minimum, maybe 3, before you get a good plant. And then you got to figure out how to open up that greenhouse door with 3 feet of snow in front of it. It gets to be, so auto flowers made a lot of sense. I'm trying to think. Tom Alexander, who had a publication called Sansamia Tips, and you ought to have him on someday. He's really one of the, he and George OG. Sansamia Tips was a mimeographed. It was well before High Times, and it told you how to grow stuff. And it popularized the word Sansamia. He mentioned auto flowers, and he may have actually grown some and shown them to me. He grew them in California, and it became pretty apparent that they were kind of cool. They weren't very strong, but they were kind of cool. And so I started doing the research. There was a group called autoflowernet.com or autoflowernet. Right. Yeah. And they wouldn't let me on because they thought I was a narc or something. All I wanted to do is do some research. I could write a book for them. And I spent months trying to get onto that website. It was terrible. Anyway, I ended up getting some and growing them, and man, that was the answer for Alaska. That was the answer. You could grow them indoors, first of all, anytime, but you could grow them outdoors, outdoor. You could grow them in the cold outdoor. It was fabulous. And so I wrote the book. I wrote the book so that people understood that these plants were easy to grow. Don't be afraid of them. And it's not a book that you guys would read. You guys know how to grow. It was a book that my aunt and uncle might read. Sorry, can I take this?
So most of the autoflowers that you've grown, are they ruderalis dominant, where they're just short, or are you getting some of the ones that people have bred over the years that they got more vigor? And
yeah. Well, the first ones that I got were, they were cute, and you got a little teeny bud off them, but then people started to grow them with an idea that they were going to commercialize them because they made a lot of sense. And one of my friends owns a very large catalog for plants and for seeds. And he had the facilities, and he and another friend, they went into business together, an onion breeder, and they ended up growing some mega, really beautiful autoflower plants. That was it. In fact, they grew these plants so well that I got a bad finger. I'm putting ice on it. That if you put them on 2-foot centers outdoors, you got maybe maybe a third more, maybe a half more than you got when you grew a sativa or an indica outdoors. That convinced me these are here. And now, of course, in Oregon, there are lots of growers that grow autos. They grow them indoors. They grow them between their plants. They grow them as their only crop because they're so quick and easy. And they're cheaper. You don't need all sorts of stuff that you need with a regular. Yeah, so I pop 3 or 4 or 5. I used to grow them in tents, now I grow I grow them anywhere. They're fun. And they're not the plant that you may remember even 5 or 10 years ago. They're beautiful. There are now super autoflowers that are not ruderalis dominant, I don't think.
Correct.
They're 3 feet, maybe a little bit taller. You get a hell of a yield, and you get all the taste that you'd want to get out of a cannabis plant. It's really wonderful.
The
Now-
super were bred with they used a mighty mite as a way to shorten the strain out, so they wouldn't use the ruderalis.
Beautiful. Yeah. Really
Now, I've
beautiful.
noticed over the years trying to grow different autos from different breeders, I would
Mhm.
still get photo period phenos in there where even under 21 hours light or whatever, they weren't switching. I actually had to go to a 12-12 light. Did you ever have some of those issues?
I did. And it happens. Again, I think people, they grow them and they sell them. They don't test them. And most of the time they work.
We
Most of the
found
time
we found out through F4 you would still see quite a few photos. Once you got F6, F7, you would eliminate most of the photosensitive stuff, but you'd still find one once in a while.
Crazy. Yeah. And of course, by the way, autoflower.net, wow, it's flourishing. People don't laugh at people who grow autoflowers anymore. People design products directly for them. It's well worth visiting. I mean, it's the Bible right there, right? I mean,
Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
well, I
I helped build that site.
Yeah, I appreciate being able to look on it now. It's fun.
I'm sorry we went through some rough periods there.
I understand. I know. It changed several times. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
So talk about the THC levels and some of the autos versus how they used to be.
Yeah, they used to be low. I can tell you that. I don't test, but I know some of my grower friends that do test, and they're beautiful. They're 20, 21, 22. I got one friend, he says he grows 31. Do I believe him? Yeah, I guess I do. But they're definitely smokable without question. I mean, I went a whole year just off my own autoflowers without going to my buddies and saying, "Hey, what are you growing?" You know, that kind of stuff. It's just,
I've seen tests come back as high as 27% on autos. So
yeah, no
they're-
reason why, no reason why they shouldn't be. Again, you know, it's the same system. It's a plant. It's putting out exudates. It's attracting bacteria. It's attracting fungi. It's going through rhizophagy. You know, it's cleating iron. It's doing all these wonderful, terrific things. And it's just a shame it's just not legal. It's a shame that your aunt and uncle can't walk into a nursery and buy a couple of plants. I mean, here in Alaska, we have a nursery system that's unlike any in the country. But what's similar to those that are in the country are different plants. You go in and buy 5 different kinds of geraniums, pelargoniums. You can buy 15 different kinds of begonias, you know, 40 different kinds of petunias. There's no reason why you can't buy 15 different kinds of autoflower cannabis for your backyard. It's so sad that at Christmas time, you know, we go in and we buy these little stupid pine trees instead of a beautiful Christmas shaped autoflower plant with little ribbons on it that are made out of rolling papers. And, you know, it's just silly. Now we're close. We're very close. And I hope we're so close we don't even know it. I went to school with Chuck Schumer, and he keeps talking about it. I go, Chuck, do it! Come on, let's go. So it's coming.
So, are you more of a THC fan, or do you like smoking plants for other cannabinoids such as CBD, CBN?
Yeah, I'm THC. I mean, I like the flavors, obviously, but I like the THC. But I think THC is a full game. I mean, it's a fool's game. So your plant only has 10% THC, you know, instead of 20%. Smoke more. I mean, I don't get it.
yeah.
Well,
Also, the type of buzz is so much more important than how much THC is in it, right? Like
Yeah.
I want good sativa buzz so I can go work and be creative. I don't want to
Yeah.
fall asleep on the couch.
Right.
Well-
You know, we don't use those terms anymore, but we do. We shouldn't. But yeah, I like being up. But on the other hand, at night, you know, when I wake up in the middle of the night, yeah.
but I can smoke a lower THC with some different cannabinoids and feel higher than a high THC.
Oh, no question. You get depending on what you smoke, you get different impacts.
Right.
I mean, whatever the entourage effect is, it's different depending on what you smoke. So yeah, and that's why people can go in and ask for a particular kind when they go to a shop. Give me Durban poison, or do you have any blueberry or whatever it happens to be? They've gotten these names because they if they're grown right and they're true to the name, they give you the same effect. Well, that makes sense. Again, it's the same plant, same bacteria, same fungi, blah, blah, blah. It's fun.
So
And what do you,
how much all that stuff goes away when you're using, you know, like a salt fertilizer or, you know, adding something in? Because there's a lot of guys that talk about, wow, I add in this biology, this bugs in a jug. I pour it in with my fertilizer rounds, so I got these things.
yes, yeah. Well, there's a difference between using bugs in a jug versus some of these chemical stuff. I mean, the chemical stuff, it changes the balance at a minimum. Some of the chemicals kill the bacteria and the fungi. Some of them cause a particular population to boom to the detriment of the other ones. You know, so we know chemicals, they just change the way the plant operates. The adding bugs in a jug's a little bit more difficult. Same with compost tea. Very hard to replicate, test. Um, from a theoretical perspective, you're using organics, you're putting them in, the plant's in charge. Why would that be any different than putting, you know, different stuff down on the ground? The plant's in charge, the plant's going to figure it out. But that's the theoretics of it. Depending on what's in the jug, it could be like peeing into the ocean. You know, what impact does it possibly have? How could it possibly, you know, it's what's the name of the medicine? And it's a German system. where you titrate down to where you only got one little teeny molecule and it's supposed to cure you. And how could that possibly? Homeopathy, which I don't believe in, but people do. Yeah, so you don't know. So I like to use the microbiometer because I can test to see whether I'm getting a change in the biology. Am I getting more biology as a result of, am I getting a higher microbiological biomass by using that bug in the jug or the powder or whatever it happens to be? Over time, is it making a difference? That's what I want to know. And again, it's not easy to test these things. You got to have plants. That's why pot growers are so good, because they've got the plants to be able to do the tests. But yeah, you use a microbiometer and you can tell whether your bug in the jug is working or not.
That's one of the
I always thought that too, because like, you know, even no matter if you get one that's got a big list of all the names and these propagules and all these different things on it, but in one tablespoon of a good compost, you have, you know, in billions more of, you know, even the different species of things.
Yeah.
So it's like,
right.
Like you said, are you pissing in the ocean? Like, what difference does it make, right?
Exactly. Particularly stuff that you buy off a shelf that's been sitting on the shelf for a year. It's got a potassium in it that put everything to sleep. Do they wake up in time? Are they washed away? I used to have arguments with the woman who invented the biometer, the microbiometer, because I think some of these things do work. She didn't think any of them. I said, well, test it with your machine, for God's sakes. Anyway, we had a lot of fun arguing about these various things, and even compost tea, very controversial.
I just want to,
yeah.
oh, go ahead. I just want to comment on something you said that you touched on. I think it's a great point for people to be aware of. Like, growing cannabis is one of the best ways you can learn about how to dial nutrients in on plants, just exactly because of what you said, because you can test your results at the end and you get a visible effect. You can actually get a sense of what you did, right?
Yeah.
With like food plants, it's so hard to tell like one flavor to another. If you don't know the difference between quality and not quality, you can't tell. With cannabis, you have that scale of like, how high am I? Does it work? How long does it last? All those pieces.
Right. And did the light make a difference? And did should I change the pH of the water? And all of those things need to be studied. And that's one of the things that will change when it is legalized. Can you imagine what happens when Bayer announces that they've been actually studying this stuff for 20 years, waiting for it to get legalized? Or is it Bayer? I guess it's Bayer. It's coming.
Sellers and buyers, I guess.
Yeah. But we have to prepare for it, because I like it the way it is. I like the local. I like the family. I don't like the corporate. But it's going to change. We're definitely going to get changes, and things like this show, Eagle. I mean, you know what I mean? It's going to be different.
I think there's going to be a commercial market for some, but I think the people that recognize quality and
the craft cannabis,
because we've already seen that with dispensaries. Like myself, like I didn't have weed for a while. I had to go to Massachusetts, go to a dispensary. I can't even get a sativa that I like. Like I can't find what I want even. I had to grow my own shit again.
Yeah, but now look at Oregon. I mean, it went through the same thing. Now, oh God, you get some pretty good stuff. But again, think of the idea that you're going to be able to go into a liquor store and pick that out and buy some really nice champagne. You know what I mean? I mean,
it's like wine, right?
It could work, right? And it could work the other way. I mean, here in Alaska, we have a local potato chip. It's just different. Hawaii has their own potato chip. Again, it's yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all works out. It's clearly coming. The Congress is talking about it as we speak. And if they could concentrate instead of listening to some of this craziness going on, maybe we'd have it done this year. But it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
So I've got a really good question, because I know you've talked about it before. I talk about it quite a bit. Leaf defoliation, and people like to try to strip their plants very heavily and very little leaves and say it produces much bigger buds.
Right.
I've always said you're losing the ability for the plant to produce energy in the photosynthesis process, but then they say,
Yeah.
well, the plant still has a green stalk, so it still has the ability to do photosynthesis.
Yeah.
What is your view on leaf stripping?
Well, I mean, the reason the plant has those leaves is because the plant, which we have already said is in charge, needs those leaves. It grew those leaves for a purpose. It keeps the leaves green for a purpose. The plant's perfectly capable of producing the phytohormone that cuts off the cuticle, that creates a cuticle that cuts the thing off so that it's no longer supporting it. It's getting something from that. Trust me, that plant, which we've already said is in charge, needs what it knows what it needs, and that's why that's there. Now, when you take them off, does the plant still get photosynthesis? Yes. Is the plant concentrating its photosynthesis? No. It's the same photosynthesis it would have had you left the leaves on it on that particular set of leaves. I mean, it just makes sense though that you leave it on. Why do people take them off? They take them off because it looks better. Because they have spider mites? I mean, why? I don't get it. What's the problem?
I remember there was a talk, it was probably advancing eco agriculture, but they were talking about grazing pastures. And there was like a study they had done where after the cattle had gone through, so the plants got damaged, and
Right.
there was response down into the root zone. So they released a bunch of exudates, like it was a percentage higher of exudates.
But that's a different thing. That's
Yeah,
completely different.
That's rotational grazing.
And it's a
and
different kind of plant. It's a grass plant.
as the plants
Yes.
get grazed on, the roots
Before.
die back a little bit, and there's like some of it doesn't make sense with that.
There's
There's a plant response though, for sure, whenever it's
Oh,
damaged
no
or grazed
question.
upon, you know what I mean? So that's, I think they're trying to, we're trying to manipulate that. I do it for IPM, or, to prevent things, definitely allows for
Well-
better airflow and take things off that aren't really going to produce on the bottom and stuff.
Yeah, but you probably wait until it begins to die. Looks like the plant's going to get rid of it. I mean, if it's bright green and it's growing, leave it there. The only time I take it off is when it dies. If you want to do in between, you wait until the plant gets a little bit, that particular set of leaves begins to curl or turn a little yellowish, or then you say, okay, I'll take it off.
Well, isn't that the plant's indication of when we're having deficiencies? It's kind of the fan leaves are some of the indication leaves to let us know.
Hey,
Sometimes-
let's also remember context here. We're manipulating the plant to bend it to our will too. A little bit.
Right. Yeah, you're right there. But no, there's 100 different reasons why a leaf will turn yellow, and it's not always that it needs nitrogen. And so yeah, you got to be careful on all of that stuff. Of course, if you grow on 100 pot plants and all of them have the same thing, ooh, how do you figure out what do I need to do here? It's an interesting science, and I see improvements all the time. People, there's no question, are going towards living soil. Nobody talks about chemicals anymore. In the garden writing industry, there are no chemical garden writers other than those that work for the chemical companies. It's, and people beginning to think things, other things like lights. What kind of lights are best? Are LEDs the best? It's going to be interesting to see how the regenerative folk think about LEDs, which break and need to be replaced every couple of years, and plastics.
I have a comment on that. I just got some Grow lights last fall, and I'm actually doing a regenerative farm here in New York this year. Starting an 8-acre farm, and all the seed starts are starting their LED. I've always started under HPS or in a greenhouse before, so I'd be curious to see how they perform. But so far, what I've seen with LED is it's incredible. It's not sunlight, but it's like probably the next best thing from what I've tested so far.
Yeah, it's
That's 6 months though, so
Yeah, no, I mean, they definitely work. There's no question about it. And now that we can change the color of them and all that kind of stuff, but it's not sunlight. That's for sure. It's not the same thing. And yeah, it's too bad. But anyway, all of these things are things that people are experimenting with, using, working with, and as more countries legalize and more people can get into the business, we're going to get more and more and more supplies, different greenhouses, different kinds of grow tents, different colors. What else? Who knows? You know, it's amazing.
Hey, Jeff,
Yeah.
I do want to congratulate you on being the longest running gardener columnist in North America.
Yeah, this
So
is right.
most of these people in our chat may not know how long you've been actually writing a gardening column for, and you
Yeah.
are the longest in North America.
I
You
think
have a lot of respect from us, by the way.
yeah,
A lot.
this is where I break down and cry. I go, oh God, I can't believe it. Yeah, every Saturday morning I get up, I say to my wife, oh God, I gotta write a garden column. And I do. I write a garden column because if you don't write a garden column, the newspaper says he's on vacation. They put your picture in. He'll be back in 2 weeks. And what does that say to me? It says he's not home, rob his house. So I always have a column, and I got into the habit. I can't break it, and I keep hoping the newspaper doesn't go out of business. I've gone through about 15 different editors, uh, and I always yell at them at least once. Don't lose this column. Make sure there's a column. Don't lose a week. Yeah, it's been quite the thing. Yeah. Thank you.
Those words drove me probably for the first 2.5 years of this show.
Really?
If you don't show up, they'll put somebody else's face in the box.
Yeah.
It,
It's
it's very true. And it drove me to continue to go every day, every day, every day, nonstop for years.
yeah,
And
it's a hard thing to do, isn't it?
it
Yeah.
is.
So
Yeah.
how many years you've been doing this?
This will starting my 5th year now.
Oh yeah, that's a long time.
I've slowed down. I'm not doing it every day anymore.
Woo!
Times a week.
Yeah, I do a
Like
podcast.
2.5 years to break the cycle, though.
I know it's hard.
Once a week takes a lot of energy, man. It's a lot.
Yeah, yeah, and of course you're doing it, with photos and pictures. I do a podcast called Teaming with Microbes, which you can get anywhere you get podcasts, and we just finished our first year, and we say, God, both of us are going to be gone. Had to buy a separate microphone I could take with me, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, you don't want to miss a week. I don't know why that is, but gee, there's a lot of this stuff out there, though. Woo!
You fall
And
out of
what-
this thing if you
And
don't
how do
stick.
people hear this stuff? I mean, all of a sudden I start getting letters from or emails from, New Zealand? What are you listening to the show about? I mean, it's like, wow, that's kind of crazy, isn't it?
So how do you find stuff to continue to write about every week?
It's easy. First of all, there's always a new microbial discovery, and it's applicable. And second of all, there's always something going on, either indoors or outdoors, that's got my curiosity that I end up researching, and I say, yeah, that make a pretty good column. I mean, for example, I'll give you a perfect example. In Alaska, we end up getting in the fall flies. In fact, I see one right here. See if I can get it. We end up getting these flies every fall. And let me see if I can. So we get these little teeny flies. I don't know if you can see that. See that little fly? Yeah. So we get these flies and we get them in the fall, and they are along all the windowsills. And what are those flies doing there? So one day, because I saw those flies, I said, I wonder what that is. I had to do my research to figure it out. And here's what I found out. These flies live outside. In the fall, they find cracks in your house, in the siding. They come into your house. In Alaska, I don't know whether you have them. These are not, by the way, meat flies. They don't eat, hamburger or fecal colon stuff. And they come in the house and they look for spaces in the walls and in your attic where they basically hibernate. Then in the springtime, this is why it ended up becoming a column. In the springtime, they go back outside and they look around for a worm. And they find a worm and they use the worm as their nest to lay eggs. And so they lay their eggs in the worm. And so if you've got these flies around your windowsills, particularly on the ground floor, that means the soil around your windows in your yard has worms in it. Whoa. Yeah. So that ended up being a column, you know? That's how I get columns. I think of things. Now, of course, you've got to, when you live in a place like Anchorage, Alaska, you got to tell people what to do. You know, it's not like growing in the lower 48 states where you guys now all are outside. I mean, we're all inside starting seeds. You know, we've got the birch buds have not opened up yet. We'll have frost up until the time they get the size of a squirrel's ear, is what I say. And once they're the size of a squirrel's ear, frosts are over for the season. You can start thinking about doing stuff outside, but the soil has to warm up. So, you know, it's all of these things. And then of course we got the daylight, which causes problems too. It's one of those strange things. Did that just go off? Yeah. So there you go.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I know, like, well, as a video creator, it seems like there's only so much we can talk about in the industry of cannabis and cultivation that it seems like it's repetitive. And so it's like we try to find new ways to get the information out there to all of our viewers. And sometimes we are repeating ourselves.
Sure. Oh, well, yeah. And sometimes, you know, I mean, you got to start the tomatoes every year. You know, you have to tell people it's time to start them. But there's always new science. There's always new science. Thank goodness. Now, there's probably less so again in cannabis because of the prohibitions, and universities have problems, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But and they're using stuff that's not, you know, what we grow. So, but it's changing. And as I say, I think this is the year. This is the year. You know, if Biden wants those votes, now's the time to get them. I'm old, so he's got my old vote.
Is there any new books and in the works at the moment?
Nah, you know, it takes a year or two to get the old book out of your system. I mean, oh my God, every day. What happens when you write a book is you have to, first of all, you have to get the idea. Okay, that comes to you, you know, and then you have to work an outline out. Well, as soon as you start working the outline out, you realize, wait a minute, if I'm thinking about writing a book, I got to create an area, not only an outline, but a place to write the book. That's your rabbit hole. And so you got to go down into your rabbit hole and work on the book. You can't be worried about your cannabis plants and who's going to water and who needs to go into the drying closet. And you're down in that rabbit hole. And when your wife calls you for dinner, you don't come out of the rabbit hole. You're down there in that rabbit hole. And so, you know, you live in that rabbit hole, and then you end up reading the same thing after you do the research, and then you can't find it, you know, again, and you have to look for it again. So you read the research over and over. And then when you start writing, you say, oh shit, did I write about this? And you got to rewrite and reread and rewrite and reread. And after about the 18th time of reading, you're done, but you got to reread it one more time. And then it's a terrible process. And so then you send it to the publisher and you get a couple of months and they get an editor and the editor comes in and you got to read it with the editor and the editor. What do you mean here?
You're already sick of it at that point, right? You're sick of it. Dog book.
you want to close the rabbit hole up while you're still inside it. So yeah, so then it comes out. You don't want to read anything. Nonetheless, another gardening book. You know, but on the other hand, what fun to be able to wander around in Barcelona and walk into a bookstore in Barcelona. You know, hey, there's 3 of my books there. Holy crow. That's kind of cool, you know.
Yeah, when you step back, you've created something really beautiful and awesome. So it's worth the
Yeah.
work, right?
Well, yeah, you hope that maybe you've helped some people, you've changed the way people think, and I do. I mean, I look at a lot of different movements. I look at no-till, I look at regenerative, frankly. Um, these are all soil food web. This is just all soil food web, and it all started with that little teeny book, and it all started with Elaine Ingham, frankly.
So, in your book about autoflowers, describe
Yeah.
some of that to people, because that's different than the living soil biology. What did you write about?
Well, first of all, I had to explain what autoflowers were, which took a little bit of doing because it's hard to write about cannabis and not be worried about the stigma. Oh God, what's my old girlfriend going to think? You know what I mean? Thank God my parents aren't alive. I'm writing about cannabis, that kind of stuff. Um, uh, but what I decided I needed to do there was not only explain the plant, but explain exactly how to grow this particular plant. And basically, it's the same thing as growing a tomato. I mean, you can grow them outdoors, you can grow them indoors, but there's a way to grow them indoors. It's simple. You use a 5-gallon bucket. How big is the container? What is the best kind of soil to use? Do you need to feed them? What is the best light? All of those things, where do you get all of these things? So I just sort of started out as if my Uncle Bob and Aunt Sally needed to learn how to grow this one particular kind of plant.
Yeah, what he did was write the manual for a new learner so they can grow their own cannabis with autoflowers. And it's an
Yeah.
excellent manual start to finish.
Yeah,
So,
it's
kind of
just-
like a how-to for dummies.
it is a how-to for dummies, and in fact, it could have been done and probably would have made some money had I done it with the dummies people, but I didn't. I decided, and it's funny because I took it to my publisher, Timber Press, which is now HSB Hatchet Press, I think they call it. Which is the third largest publisher in the world. Holy crow, who would ever expect that? So I went from this little teeny Timber Press where you knew everybody there, and just fun to be at. When I did the autoflower book, I went to Timber Press because I'm obligated under contract to offer them the books first, and they said, "Yeah, we don't want this," because they were worried about the stigma. Now I think they must be, well, certainly Hatch must be looking back going, bad mistake. So I found this wonderful little small press in Vancouver, out on an island outside Vancouver, and they were just terrific to be with. And it was a whole different experience. The whole thing was done electronically. I never once had to print anything out, which is really simply amazing. And it was a terrific, different kind of experience and it was going to be paperback, which I can't get Hatchet or anybody to do on the Teaming with Microbes and other
Was
ones.
that Seagull Island by any chance?
I don't know what the island's name was. I don't think it was. No.
I lived up that way for a while.
Yeah, my wife kills herself because there used to be an island where her family lived. They owned the island, and then they moved to the United States and gave up citizenship. Man, would she love to have Canadian citizenship? Oh well, you win some, you lose some. And what a terrific place it would be to grow weed, I guess. But whew,
It
hard to
is.
say.
It is.
Chad would like to know if there's any advice for turning in a sandy soil into a good cannabis soil.
You gotta have organics. Sand doesn't hold it. That's just all there is to it. You gotta add organics. Probably the best thing to do would be to throw that sand into a compost pile, and then just take the compost. The sand is good. It'll help with drainage, but it's basically the organics that you need to have. So add them.
Top dress with a ton of compost and mulch over it and keep the soil protected. Build.
Yeah, well, and if you're indoors, mix it. Normally I don't advise people. I like to keep my soil just the way it is. I replant without dumping stuff out, and I use the same soil over and over and over again, without even taking the roots of the old plants out. The new plants the roots travel right along that little zone. There are all sorts of bacteria and fungi and yeast and algae and everything else that the plant's attracted that are right there. So I just leave it.
So that brings a question up for me. There's been a lot of talk recently about the virus problem that I guess tends to propagate on roots more than anything else. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, disease, nematodes and viruses are, they can be really a real serious problem. And then you have to break the rules, and you have to do what you have to do in order to not have the virus. Uh, it's, and that happens, of course, to growers more than it happens to just, average Joe who just every now and then decides to try a crop. Yeah, and it's a shocker. And of course, then what happens is, oh my God, look at this crop. I'm going to lose the whole crop if I don't spray it with, and so there's too many people who do that. You got to learn to lose you lose the crop. Don't spray it, because this is supposed to be ingested stuff.
Or try a foliar feed or some other corrective for nutrition, rather than throw chemicals at it, right?
Yeah. Spray it with nutrients, or spray it with a compost tea. Spray it with some of these bacteria. There are all sorts of things you should try, but what should never be done is chemicals.
So going to chemicals, let's go back to kind of Smiley's question about salt-based like nutrients. There's a lot of talk like among living soil people that it kills the biology, but then there's talk that it doesn't fully kill biology. What is your take on this, Jeff?
Yeah, it depends on what the biology is and what the particular substance is. I mean, generally, what we know for sure is that they throw the balance out like crazy. I mean, there's certain bacteria that produce nitrogen just go nuts with Miracle-Gro, and that's, you put it down there and it works because just a teeny bit of it, and they go nuts. But what happens to everybody else that's supposed to be there? So you end up having to be God. You have to regulate. You got to keep an eye on things in a way that you normally would not normally keep an eye on things. And I always think about, if there isn't the right bacteria, you got to somehow get whatever that bacteria supplies to the plant, or the plant's not going to be done right. I knew Horace Hagedorn really well. He used to come up. He was the founder of Miracle-Gro. And I tell this story about how I used to work for my father and my grandfather before he went into the business. And he went into the business because he hated working for my father and my grandfather, who made butter. Dullest job in the world. I hated it. I did the same thing. But once he discovered that I was in a garden conference that he was at, he and I became really, really good friends. And he would come up to Anchorage, and he would sit on the property, and I would get gardeners to come in with flowers and vegetables and whatnot. And he would sit behind the camera, and he would ask questions while they talked about their beautiful stuff. And then the Super Bowl would come up, and there would be my property on the Super Bowl with these guys doing these commercials. I'm convinced, had he been alive, when Teaming with Microbes came out, when the soil food web became popularized, he would have glommed on it like no one's business. As it is, the company he founded is the largest purveyor of organics in the world. In the world, they sell more organic stuff, more organic soil than anybody else. What he would have done is said, okay, enough of the green stuff. We don't need it anymore. And he might have said, as an advertiser, that mean Scott guy, I don't like him. Get him out of that lady's yard right now. Have you seen those commercials? Plant this right now, or you're going to have a terrible looking lawn. It's just like, come on.
You can have an angry lawn after that dude's been there.
That's right. So a lot of this stuff is there because it's always been there, and there hasn't been a lawsuit to get rid of it yet, or because they've got so much invested and they make so much money out of this stuff. Doesn't mean it's any good. And so the salt-based stuff, it definitely works. There's no question it works. but it doesn't work as well as living soil, period. It
Well,
can't.
the thing that John Kempf talks about all the time is that when you put down a chemical for early season, you suppress that biology link between the plant and the biology, and you compromise that for the rest of the growing season. So that when the nutrient demand, that frame building finishes and flower and fruiting starts, you have a compromised biological system that can't support the nutrients of the plant. Whereas if you
Yeah,
can
that's
put it down and screw that whole relationship up, it'd be able to foster the amount of nutrients the plant needs more easily.
yeah. I mean, and that's the same thing I'm saying. I mean, you throw the balance out to the point where it doesn't matter what the plant does, and the plant will do stuff to get what it needs.
And it's a system, right? When you throw one thing in, you're just tipping the system out, really.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Uh, and so yeah, those salt-based things, they really bother the hell out of me. And there's so many non-salt-based stuff available now. I mean, my gosh, I have a friend whose whole company, he's got nothing but I met this guy, he's got a company called Alcana, Alicana, I think it's called. It's in he sells all throughout Europe, a lot of stuff in Germany. Um, and it's just again, when you think about it, these plant-based, I call them micro foods, some people call them fertilizer. It just makes so much sense that they work. I mean, they were, it's sort of, when people say, yeah, I'm not a vegetarian, but that cow I ate, it was a vegetarian, as if that makes it any better. Yeah, but these plant things, they're vegetarian all the way through. You're putting the stuff on that breaks down into the individual components of plants that they got, every, again, to go back to this whole idea of wonderment and teaming with nutrients. I mean, it's the whole idea that everything that is in a plant is made in that plant. Whew, man, blows my mind.
They're little
Blows.
manufacturing plants, aren't they?
Oh my God, there are gazillions of things that they make. It's mind-boggling. I did a talk once where I had to think about being small enough so that I was inside a plant cell. What would happen if you were inside one of these root cells? I mean, it'd be like being in a stadium, and you'd have maybe 50 semi trucks around. Those would be the mitochondria. There would be these tubes and ropes and strings, netting all over the place, connecting stuff. This endoplasmic reticulum, which is a slide that's attached to the nucleus, and the noise and the light and the movement and the thing. There's I'm trying to remember. There's something. It's just phenomenal. There's something called it's a Harvard University film, which they update every year. The Cell of Life, or if you just, I'm sure if you Google, or now I use something called Ecosia. Don't use Google anymore. Use Ecosia. They don't make money. They make trees. For every dollar they make, they plant trees. So go to Ecosia and put in Harvard microbiology living cell cartoon, and you'll end up with it. It's got music, and it shows you on a microscope, on a sub-microscopic level, what goes on inside these cells. It's absolutely phenomenal. And then you multiply that by gazillions, quadrillions, and that's a plant. Whew, man. Woo! Sends chills up. I mean, come on, Sheldrake, let's write that book. Did you guys find it? Were you able to find it? Yeah, it's there. It's good. Ah.
So, what are some of the stuff you'll be planting in your garden this year? What do you
Well, tomatoes are hereditary in the Lowenfels family, so a lot of tomatoes, zinnias. My wife happens to like a lot of zinnias. Let's see what else. Sweet peas, snap peas. This is early stuff. Potatoes, getting potatoes ready. We'll get fuchsias and tuberous begonias and pelargoniums, geraniums to the normal people, petunias, all sorts of stuff. I've got 2 greenhouses, and whew, it's hard to travel when you get stuff growing from seeds. I happen to believe you're not a real gardener unless you grow something from seed. And there's too many gardeners who just simply go to the nursery or the supermarket. They buy their 6-packs or 4-packs. That's not
Complete,
gardening.
completely
fine.
agree. Completely agree. And furthermore, learn to propagate your own seed and your own cuttings. Get the
Yes.
stick down at least.
Save a lot of money. Oh, plus, it changes buying into gardening. That's what gardening is.
And when you get dialed in, you can improve the quality of your seed and the quality of your yield and production every year.
So let's
Yeah,
talk about that, because Dr. James White says it's very important how we store our seeds to keep the endophytes on them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so one of the things that really just jumped out when I wrote Teaming with Bacteria was that we tend to be an industry where people sterilize the seeds. They think they're sterilizing the seeds. They're not really, because they don't get inside the seed, but they do wipe out a lot of bacteria, and that's not good. The other thing we do that's not good is we tend to start seeds in paper towels. And then we take the seed with a pair of tweezers and we put it in and put it in the soil, drop it in. No. Take that little piece of paper towel with it. You can unwrap it if you want, but take that paper towel with it. It's got the bacteria in it. So there's no question that the bacteria are inside, these endophytic bacteria are inside the seeds. There's no question that they require some oxygen, so that when we seal the oxygen up in the airtight bag or put it in a jar, give it some air, let it have some air. I'm not even so sure that sticking it in the refrigerator makes a lot of sense. But I know that the bacteria need to be treated as if they're live and fun and and it's not just the bacteria, there's fungi on there as well. They get in there. There's got to be some yeast on there as well.
I like to say we're not germinating the seed, but we're germinating the seed and the soil community with that seed all at the same time.
Yeah, we're hatching a microbiome.
So I can't use hydrogen peroxide, RSO, to germinate, because a lot of people do.
Yeah, I don't. Not anymore. I did. Not anymore. It's just, yeah. Does it work? Sure, it works. Will the seeds end up with bacteria? Sure, they will. They'll get some from the soil. They'll get some from that are endophytic that come in, but they won't get the full panoply of them. I don't think they will. Plus, it doesn't particularly do great. If you use hydroperoxide on regular soil, it doesn't do particularly great things. So, no, it's a Ross. You're causing a sunburn. I have this great slideshow, which I think I showed this one. I got one laugh in Barcelona, where I have a picture of Ross from Friends with it lifting his shirt, showing a sunburn. I got one laugh. It was not worth it. Anyway, yeah, hydroperoxide, not a good idea. What else?
What about using like any type of recharge or some other biology to germinate them with?
I have. I look at the label pretty carefully. I use mycorrhizal fungi. I roll my seeds in mycorrhizal fungi. That may have some detrimental impact. That may be some competition for food or for space. So I don't know if that's necessarily a terrific thing to do, but it does seem to help the plant. But what I tend to do now with the mycorrhizal fungi is I put it in the soil and let the roots grow into it. It's viable for a couple of days, 3 or 4 days, and when it gets wet, so I let the roots grow into it. But
so do you just germinate your seeds right into the soil then, Jeff?
So sometimes when I can, I do. Yeah. Particularly auto seeds. I hate to move the auto seeds. When you transplant an auto seed, you can if you damage those root hairs, which we now know are formed by bacteria during the rhizophagy cycle. Talk about blow my mind. Holy crap. Wait a minute. They're not there for nutrient sucking up. They're not there because the plants is trying to find what? No, they're there. They're growing out into the soil so that they can blow bacteria far away from the roots so that the new roots will. Whoa, blow my mind. Blow my mind. Anyway, how did we get into that? We got into that somehow, but it blew my mind, and my mind has been blown.
It is somewhat of an explanation when for a long time in the cannabis world, we've heard people talk about water roots and
Yeah.
some of those types of things where they don't have all the hairs on them. And this kind of brings some different light to that for sure.
Yeah, they probably don't have bacteria in them at all. I mean, the experiments that Dr. White and his students did where they took the bacteria out and they got these sick root systems that grew up horizontally and very, very thin. Definitely no root hairs. It was just like, whoa, very strange, really strange. And there's a movie, I mentioned it. It's in the appendix of the book. It's a literal, the hairs do take in nutrients. It's a very thin wall, and the nutrients do move into the cells and do get into the plant that way. But there's a video that somebody took of the cell wall growing. Now think about this. So you've got a tube, and it has to add on bricks as it's growing. It adds on bricks. You don't want to necessarily leak out all the stuff, and so it oscillates. There's a video of it on an atomic level, almost atomic level, certainly molecular level, where you can see this oscillation occur and the construction. It's fascinating stuff. These roots and their relationship to the bacteria and how they grow, and it's.
I'll bet that functions a lot like the helix for DNA, right? The way the DNA assembly happens and that helical structure. It's funny because you look at like the solar system is actually spinning through space like that too.
It's fascinating.
That model scales all directions apparently.
Yeah, and I talk about this in my talks. When I walk around, a lot of times I'll see things. I'll see things in public. And I'll say, Jesus, that looks just like, So when I see the hoses that connect the tractor trailer to the trailer, those hoses represent, they're like the end of. It's just fascinating stuff.
You see that cellular machinery, right?
Yeah, and the last chapter of Teaming with Nutrients, I have two pictures. One is a microscopic picture of a cell. The other is a picture of space. And they look alike. They look exactly alike. How could that possibly be?
Have you heard Paul Stamets talk on the future is fungi and how the fungi are very much like that as well, from the micro scale to the macro?
Yeah, he wrote the forward to Teaming with Fungi. Yeah, his talks are just simply phenomenal and again mind blowing. He hangs out with a guy named oh God, his name just went out of my mind. He's a nutriist. Anyway, yeah, Paul Stamets is phenomenal, simply phenomenal. His books are phenomenal. His products are phenomenal. In fact, is this one of his? He has a coffee supplement that I think is just delicious. He's a phenomenal guy. And he hangs out with Michael Amaranthus, who was the guy that really introduced mycorrhizal fungi. And this doctor whose beard I could see. Oh God, I went to school.
I know who you mean. I can't remember his name either.
Andrew Weil, Dr. Weil.
Yeah.
The three of them must be a party. Can
you imagine those conversations?
Yeah, because they're into science and they look at stuff from a scientific perspective, and you guys do as well. We all do. That's why we're having this conversation, but we don't do it 24/7. And I think great scientists do it 24/7. It drive you crazy is what it does.
I'm working toward it.
yeah, me too. And it does drive you crazy. I mean, there's 5 or 6 new articles to read every day. You get them through Ecosia, which is planted, by the way, over 110 million trees. Wow, that's a lot of trees. That's a lot of Googling. Yeah, it's fun stuff. It's fun
So
stuff.
how are you feeling about cannabis and mushroom now kind of becoming legal? And more people are cultivating like mushrooms. There are a few people I've seen even trying to do like cultivating mushrooms in and next to cover crop.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a friend who's been selling psychedelic cannabis legally for years and years and years. In fact, he sold the business before all of this started to happen. I- there really is not a comparison, I don't think, between cannabis and mushrooms. I think they're two different things. And I think from a cannabis industry perspective, we make a mistake when we compare the two favorably. Yeah, they both may get you high, but there's a big difference between smoking a joint and dropping a shroom. Big difference in terms of duration, big difference of parts of the brain that it impacts, big difference of what it does to your body, what it does to your liver. So I think we got to keep the two separate. Michael Pollan, I think, is of the same opinion. You got to keep the two separate. We're not going to end up with dispensaries where you walk in and you say, give me that Amanita muscari, eagle, as opposed to the Amanita muscari. I don't think that we're going to ever see that.
The way Colorado's moving, when we decriminalized all plant-based medicine,
Wow.
we're already moving in that direction.
No
Oregon
shit.
too.
Yes.
Oregon too, right?
Yes.
Oregon to me is still, you got to get a guide to take you and bring along the ride. I did not realize that of course they do some stupid things by law. Yeah.
I was going to say,
Denver is about to hold their first mushroom festival here in June.
I read that and I thought that was a regular mycological. They have mushroom festivals all the time
Yeah.
where you go up into the mountains and you pick mushrooms and you all bring them in and identify them. And Paul Stamets is sitting there and he identifies them. But good for Denver. Mushrooms have a place, no question about it. And I people are definitely titrating them or taking teeny little bits, microdosing. I guess that's what it's called. I did not realize you could just it's funny. I think in Japan for a long time they're perfectly legal to go take a psilocybin. I mean, it was perfectly legal. Cannabis was not legal.
when I lived in BC, there was a guy that like had a store in Vancouver, like ongoing for like a year and a half, and they finally like busted him for it. But he was selling every kind of like psychedelic mushroom. You could just go in and buy however much you wanted of whatever.
Well, we know that guy.
busted him, and, like, we
Somebody
saw
in
it,
Portland.
like, wow, it took that long to nail him.
Yeah,
Well,
they
in
did it.
Colorado, we're able to sell spores,
Oh, yeah.
syringes with liquid cultures, agar plates with mycelium already started. We just can't sell the mushroom. We can
Right.
take donations like cannabis years ago, but
Right.
so there's still ways that
It's interesting.
it's happening.
Yeah, I think we've got a real education process we're going to have to take care of so that they don't screw it up. I mean, in Alaska, for example, your seeds by definition have THC. No, they don't. You can't buy a seed in Alaska. You can't mail a seed in Alaska. It's against the law because of the definition. So we got to be careful that that doesn't happen to the other industry as well. It's got to be treated, but I think it's a mistake to merge the two. There's different impact, and I think one has a negative impact on the cannabis side.
I think they're entirely different substances and should be treated as such altogether. Really.
Yeah, that doesn't mean you can't sell them out of the same store, but the education is a little different. I mean, we sell beer and we sell hard liquor out of the same stores and whatnot. But
Well,
yeah,
Dr. Ethan Russo kind of talks about the use of cannabis and mushrooms together. And there's another doctor. She's talks about cannabis and mushrooms quite a bit and using them together.
Yeah, well, and it does sort of make sense. I mean, if you're taking it for a mind experience and for a mind altering experience, it does make sense. Same token, it makes sense to maybe put different psychedelics together. I don't do that, folks. I'm not making that suggestion. But people do. Very interesting.
I think they work together great personally. But at the end of the day, I think what we're really trying to do is like limit a new user from going in and trying something that they're just not experienced to handle, really, right?
Precisely.
I don't want to see somebody go do a bunch of mushrooms and go off the deep end and go, jump themselves off a cliff or do something stupid.
Yeah.
'cause they're
Or
not
or any more than you'd want them to go out and drink liquor and do the same thing.
right.
You know.
Yeah. It's
Well,
there are
we
other
had
folks just as
we had a
dangerous.
situation here in Colorado, down in Pueblo, where I'm from, that we had two medics that worked emergency ambulance. They decided, oh, mushrooms are legal. We're gonna go camping. We're gonna go eat some. And these two were apparently friends. Well, somehow a gun was involved. One shot
Oh,
and
boy.
killed the other one because they were saying that they were thinking telepathically to each other about who was going to get the gun. And it was like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Why would you even have a gun when you're taking mushrooms? But
No.
there's crazy stuff that's already happening because people are experimenting and not knowing how to properly take it.
Right. And they'll blame that on cannabis, I know. But yeah, people have to be careful about it. This time has come. It's a plant, I mean, actually it's a fungi. But people just have to be educated. We spent so much time and money on cannabis. I mean, my God, the whole prison system, employment, it's just incredible. I'm 75 years old. When I was in college, so I was 18, 19, we're going to legalize this. I mean, my God, still not legal. They're still throwing people in jail in New Mexico. I just read the feds are arresting people. Wait a minute. This is 2024. It's not supposed to be happening. It really is amazing. It really is amazing. But it's changing. Thank God. Taking a long, long time. I can't imagine having this radio show, Eagle, 25 years ago. Can't imagine it. They would have come and busted your door open, gotten you.
Dude, 15 years ago here. Easy.
Yeah, well,
Easy.
Tom Alexander tells the story with 1980s Operation Green Merchant. They came, they said, hey, if they're advertising in Sansamia Tips, if they're advertising in High Times, then they're growing weed, and that's against the law. So we'll go and we'll raid all of these places that sell High Times and Sansamia Tips, get their list of customers, and go raid them. Operation Green Merchant, they raided 240 different places all on the same day, not realizing everybody had telephones. They were calling each other up, and it was a disaster. It just was unbelievable. So, yeah, hopefully we're heading towards an era of relax, folks. It's going to be okay. This stuff has been around for a long, long time. It's going to be around for longer, we hope, and people should just relax. In fact, they're talking about Ukraine. Here's a perfect example. So Ukraine obviously has had tremendous devastation. I mean, my God, they're going to have rebuilding projects in Ukraine that's going to make, it's just going to be an unbelievable economic boom. What are they thinking about using right now? There's not enough cement in the world to rebuild Ukraine. They're going to use hempcrete, cannabis. Wow. They're going to grow it right there, and rebuild their whole country out of hempcrete. That's a beautiful thing. And that would not have happened had there not been an illegal cannabis industry where people were growing this stuff and saying, gee, I wonder what I can use these leaves for. I wonder whether there's another use, whether I can squeeze a little bit more out of this plant, whether I can be a little bit more regenerative. It's amazing. So it's an amazing plant, and it's an amazing industry.
I can't help but wonder if hemp, it's just another good reason that hemp will save the world. I was watching a thing the other day, ironically, on sand. And it was suggesting the fact that we were running low on sand because we were using it in so much concrete and building artificial islands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I can't help but wonder if the hempcrete can stop that. You know what I mean? Level it
Yeah,
back
sure.
out if we were to start to implement it.
I'm sure it would be a gigantic help. Um, yeah, it's a really interesting product,
Well,
and it's got
you take hempcrete with the 3D printing that is available now for houses. And
wow,
right there, it's so cheap and inexpensive that you could build several houses in a day at that point.
yeah, amazing, absolutely amazing. Huh. Well, it's happening. I mean, so we'll see it all happen. But again, it would not have happened had there not been this underground cannabis industry and people thinking about how to use the plant and different uses that it has. It's an amazing story. I mean, Michael Pollan tells it. Did hemp train us or did we train hemp? Well, maybe it trained us.
I think it trained us. I think he's right.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty damn amazing. Phew. So now, where are you guys located? You're in Phoenix right now. No, where?
I'm in Colorado, Pueblo,
Oh, you're
Colorado.
Colorado. Okay, where's everybody else located? We got New
Michigan,
York,
Michigan.
And
Michigan,
I'm in upstate New York.
New York. Okay, huh? Interesting. Yeah, all states that have been legalized. What are we
Finally,
up to? Yeah, how many are we up to now?
25 plus at last I looked, but I don't know. I can't keep track.
At some point in time, not this Supreme Court, but at some point in time, the Supreme Court would normally say, geez, that seems to me the social norm is legal. I mean, isn't that why we can
we have
look
quorum,
at
don't
naked?
we?
Yeah. I mean, nudity used to be no, bad, terrible, until it became socially normal. And then the Supreme Court said, "Oh, that's okay. You can look at Playboy," and you would think it would be the same thing with cannabis. 25 states, unbelievable. But it's going to happen nationally. We're going to have a national. There's no question. I mean, a day doesn't go by that Chuck Schumer doesn't talk about it. And it's just a question of weaving it through those committees, getting it by Pete Session from Texas. There's different little ways but it's going to happen. It's going to happen this year, I hope. And
Do
then
you
what?
think cultivation will be on the table, or do you think the big companies will want to, industrialize it?
I think the first problem is going to be tax. I think the bill I have now has like a 25% tax on anybody who grows it. I think the big companies are clearly out there lobbying, but this is one industry, the cannabis industry, that has a pretty good set of lobbyists, doesn't it? And you got Normal, you got a bunch of lobbyists that are capable of working the cannabis question. And I am sure they're camped outside the offices of the senators as we speak. No question about it.
Yeah, our industry has a little hitting power, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It didn't used to, but it does now. I mean, it used to be such a bad stigma around this that you hit doing it, you never talked about it. I mean, the idea of 420 is there because they couldn't talk about it. Gosh, that's really something.
Shit, Bill Clinton had to lie about inhaling just to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I
Exactly.
mean, public opinion back then was like that.
Don't even say you did it.
Yeah, no, you couldn't. And God forbid your parents should find a joint. Oh my God.
Oh boy. Yeah, that was
Oh
fun.
my God. Oh my God. You can only imagine. Yeah.
How that's changed though. Nowadays, you talk about Bill Clinton denying it. Now we're seeing more of, politicians. I do smoke.
Well,
You know
not only
what
that,
I
but
mean? It's trying to draw in to the crowd a little bit.
sure.
We see-
And medical marijuana has definitely taken off. There's no question. Older people are among the number one users. They are the number one users. It's not kids, it's the older people. And the CBD explosion has been phenomenal. Oh my God. Yeah, that was fun. In the autoflower book, I go through the different terpenes and the difference between terpenes and cannabinoids and where they are in the plant, what the plant looks like, as you grow it. A lot of people have never seen cannabis growing. They'll see a picture of it, but they don't know what it looks like. When do you harvest it? How do you know you've got a plant that's doing well, that's maturing properly, those kinds of things. And so that's covered in that last book. There we go.
It is a fascinating plant, 100%. I'm curious, when I seen you take a drink earlier, what's in the bottle?
This bottle contains, where is it? It's got,
It looked like kombucha.
it looks like kombucha, but it's got reishi mushrooms. It's got chaga off of birch trees, and it's got turkey tail mushrooms.
Oh, it's at the mushroom root beer kind of thing?
Yeah, it's
It
so
makes some
good.
mushroom pops now. Yeah.
Yeah, so
That's
I was
good stuff.
I was in Portland and I went to something called the Light Show. They had this weekend, 2 weekends where everybody went nuts with lights. They were walking around with lights, blowing up lights. They had light displays and firecrackers. It was just a crazy weekend, like Portland used to be before COVID. And as I was walking out of the light area, a guy handed me a little cup of this stuff. And I was walking with my wife. She didn't want to drink hers. I drank it. I grabbed hers. I drank it. Holy crow, this is the best stuff ever. I walked back to find the guy. What stores carry this? It's so good. It's so good. I would hate to be in the Coca-Cola business. I mean, then how could they beat this? It's good for you and it tastes good. God.
It is very delicious.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're making cannabis plants, cannabis drinks available. You get all the CBD drinks available now, but they're making actual cannabis drinks available in liquor stores and whatnot. They're not supposed to, but you go into Canada, you go into shops these days, and there's 1/3 of the products drinks, syrups, drinks, colas, whatnot. Because they act quicker, 15 minutes as opposed to 2 hours. So people go for that kind of stuff, but. Yeah, it's really something. Really something.
I like Paul Stamus. He's talked recently about lion's mane,
Yeah,
psilocybin mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms,
psilocybin. Yeah,
and niacin. And he talks about the tapping and improving your tap ability as you get older, because as we get older, we lose our tap ability. And he says it shows that the cognitive brain actually repairing the atoms and neurons,
Neurons.
Yeah.
neurons. And it improves our tapping ability as we age.
And he's upgraded that stack to 5 psilocybin, turkey tail, lion's mane, cordyceps, and niacin. I think all of those together is supposed to, I think it was 8x or something like that, acceleration of neural regrowth on patients. It was incredible.
He's really something. And try his coffee additive. It's really delicious. It's got 3 out of the
lion's mane.
Yeah,
one of them. Yep.
Yeah, it's good.
Stuff.
Good.
I grow chaga all the time on our birch trees here. You harvested September, but I've got it all over the property, which made me very happy. And then I realized, wait a minute, it means my birch trees are all dying, but that's okay.
Wait a minute. Did you say you're growing chaga on spruce?
No, birch.
Birch. Okay.
No, not spruce.
I was going to say, I never heard of that. How are you doing that?
No, very difficultly. Yeah, no, it's on my birch trees, but it means your birch trees are dying, unfortunately, but it gives me a little bit of health. So, what the heck, as long as you don't let it rot, you got to get it, you got to grind it, you got to keep it, you can't let it get moldy. Once it gets moldy, throw it out. Don't try it. And anything Paul Stamets writes, get it, read it, study it, because he really is great. YouTube's.
If you want to go further into chaga, you know who else is great is Arthur Haynes. He's a taxonomist out of Maine. Oh, check out his books. He's amazing.
Do that.
What's the name of his books? I can't think off the top of my head, but check out Arthur Haynes. Yeah, he's amazing. He goes into chaga and how to use it properly, how to harvest it sustainably. He and another guy, Daniel Vitalis, are both excellent info along those lines.
I'll check them out.
Yeah. And Arthur's got 2 volumes of books. It's on my bookshelf. I'll dig it up.
All right. You got it. Hurry up, because we only got another minute. Oh no, we're overtime as it is.
Over, yeah. Yeah. I do appreciate you coming and hanging out, Mr. Lowen.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. What was I going to do? Hang out with my wife. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's what I was going to do. She's downstairs right now saying, get down here for dinner. What are you in the wormhole again? She thinks I'm in the book hole, rabbit hole.
You definitely you talked about being seen in Barcelona, your books in Barcelona, but I don't think that there's too many of us growers where like you aren't one of the first books we reach for when we
Oh,
start our
well,
cultivation practices.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, I got a note from Turkey. The Turkish Department of Agriculture wanted the books. So they translated the book, or they had the books, all of them translated into Turkish of all things. I thought, gee, that's an awful nice thing to have happen. You know, and I got a note from a translated letter note, email from a farmer in some little valley in Turkey who read the book, adopted Living Soil, and was thanking me for the change, not only in his health, but his family's health as a result of not having to use the Tevro. I mean, God, just, you know, I don't need to make a dime if I get a letter like that every now and then. That's all I need to know. So,
Well, Dr. David Montgomery kind of talks the same thing about nutrition and soil health and how it relates back to our health.
oh, absolutely. He and I go back and forth. And in fact, in rhizophagy, there is the way the plant is tricked into going through the cell wall, this creation of this fake slime mold, fake slime. The same thing happened. I wrote David, the same thing happens in the intestine. It tricks the bacteria to move into the intestine. Fascinating that both a plant and a human would have that happen. What I was going to say back before, and I lost the train of thought, but maybe this is what we ought to end the show on. We got to concentrate on our soil. We're ending up losing so much soil every year that if you believe the naysayers, we've only got 60 to 60, well, now it's given this year, 60 seasons of growable soil left. We're destroying it. It's blowing away. We're destroying its structure. We're rototilling. We're using these mass combines. We're completely ruining our soil. It goes beyond the soil food web. It's the soil itself. And so what we really got to concentrate on, and the cannabis grower is part of this, is we've got to concentrate on growing soil, making more soil, and making sure that the soil we have is living. It's so important that we do that.
And if you do that right, you can turn it from degrading to regenerating in less than 3 years. So
absolutely.
And you can change the whole dynamic of everything, everyone's health, the planet, like literally the planet in a positive way.
Right.
And when you mean living, Jeff, do you mean by like cover crops all year round and no bare soil?
No bare soil, full of microbes, full of arthropods, microarthropods, life full out throughout the soil, creating structure, creating air holes, reservoir places for water, eating each other, dropping dead, decaying, producing all sorts of terrific things that other things need or don't need. Yeah, it's got to be living soil. Simple.
And how much are you trying to interfere with that and control it?
I'm trying to do as little as possible, but part of that has to do with the fact that I've got arthritis, and so it's a pain in the ass to do. So, no, I try to do as little as possible in terms of interfering with the soil food web.
Nature, we're letting the system balance, right?
Yeah, well, nature's grown stuff forever. It knows how to do it. All of the associations that needed to be made were made. I don't think we're going to see any new ones. We may discover new ones, but I don't think there are any new ones that are going to be developed. Certainly not in our lifetime. So we got to go with nature. Go with the soil food web. It works. It's worked for all these eons, and it's going to work for eons more if we let it.
You mentioned the podcast. You want to go ahead and tell us how often and when we can catch the podcast you're putting out?
Oh, yeah. I'm on every Friday with a friend of mine named Jonathan White. We talk about, it's called Teaming with Microbes. And it's on drops every Friday morning, and it's on wherever you get podcasts. We talk a little bit about what's going on in Anchorage, but we try to do so in terms of the soil food web. We talk a lot about new science, and we love compost.
Love the fact that after doing this for 50 years, you seem to be just as excited about it as when you started, it seems. So it's pretty awesome to see that you still have the passion for what you're doing.
Well, I thank you for that. It's because of people like you and people who read the book and who say, gee, I learned something, and thank you. That's what makes my day. So I thank you.
Appreciate you very much. Well, with that being said, I guess we should wrap it up. I like to keep on my time schedules. That way we're good with our guests and they always want to come back.
Hey, sure.
So
let me know. Let me know. I'll be back.
I would 100% love that. 100%. Hopefully
good.
soon.
All right, folks. Be well. Have a great weekend.
You have a great weekend as well.
And don't forget, team with microbes.
Have a good night. Thank you, Jeff.
You bet.
Thank you.
For the rest of you guys, you want to go ahead and remind them as well where they can keep up with you guys and the awesome information and cool things you guys are doing.
I guess I'll start it. You can find me on YouTube, Medically Fit, or Instagram. Just been finishing up some of my fall season, winter season flower, getting ready to move stuff outdoors because season's coming, and I'm getting some AC put in my house so I can do some indoor summer growing this year. Looking forward to that.
Very nice, very nice. I'm Carlton. I'm on Pharmacy Seeds Network. I'm on Instagram as We Do Agriculture. I'm all over the place elsewhere, here and there. I'm getting ready to roll out a big farming operation. I've been working on tractors and stuff, and in the meantime, working on my servers and trying to get all my video stuff up so I can film it and document it and roll forward. So been busy with that. But yeah, that's it.
You can find us at smileys.angels on Instagram or smileysangels.net. It's where we do sell our seeds and some other things. Right now, there's Happy 420 is a 50% off coupon. So.
And Eagle, as soon as this show's done, I am rewatching this shit.
Yeah, Jeff's great, dude. He's awesome.
Definitely a good one.
That was awesome.
Appreciate you guys. I say this every time, but all the great questions and knowledge you bring to this project, I greatly appreciate 100%. With that being said, we'll be doing this again in 2 weeks with our guest will be Dragonfly Earth Medicine. Looking forward to that as well. Other than that, I guess you can find me on this here channel. You can kind of keep up with me a little bit. My new endeavor on the Run Eagle One Run channel there. I've been doing training videos and the live races as well. So that's where you can find me. But until then, you find me here Monday.
Good weekend, guys.
Have a great weekend, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to do something nice for somebody. Random acts of kindness do save lives. With that being said, thank you guys for another